Well, good morning, friends, and welcome to my channel. I am Crystal, and this is Homemaking on the Homestead. And today I am going to be sharing with you some fall cooking, fall baking, and fall canning that I have been doing this last week. And before I get there, I am also going to do just a little bit of chatty with you guys. So, which is why I've got my coffee. Anyway, so let's see. We did not have a video last week because I was just coming back from our little road trip, camping trip that we had with my oldest daughter and her family down in Arizona. So her and her husband and kids, they had already planned a camping trip down there, and we had talked to them earlier in the summer about joining them, and they loved that idea, and we figured, well, why not? We've already been to Arizona once this year, but hey, we're retired, and that's we can do those things. And then my oldest son heard we were going to go, and he has an RV himself, and so he was like, hey, I would love to join you guys. So that's what he did, and oh my goodness, we had so much fun. If you hear some noise in the background, my husband is actually in the basement doing some maintenance on our wood furnace to get us ready for the heating season. So I don't think it's going to interrupt too much, but anyway. If you follow me on my Instagram account, then you got to come along the whole 10-day journey with me. I was posting in the daily stories and just showing you our trip along the way. And then if you missed that, because the Instagram stories go away in 24 hours, if you missed that, I also did a little video and posted that also on my Instagram account. And I made a reduced 1-minute video of the whole entire trip for shorts here on YouTube, and I can post a link to that up here, get that right. And so if you want to just check out our trip, it was a lot of fun. After we left the campground, we ended up heading into California and all the way up I-5 to Northern California, where we have 2 daughters that live there. My daughter Sierra, you may have remembered her from a video I did last December when she was here. I can also list that one there if you haven't. And my daughter Emily and her husband and their 3 little boys. And so we stopped and spent 2 nights with them before finally making our way back home. All in all, it was a great trip. However, I came home feeling just a little bit exhausted. You know, it just takes me a few days to kind of get back into the swing of life, clean everything up, and you know, just get back on my regular routine. So there was no way that I was going to be able to get a video out the week that I got home, but that's okay. Everybody needs a break, right, at now and then, right? Okay, so today, let's move on to today's video. I am really excited. We had, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 days where temperatures were like in the 70s. The nights were cooling off. It felt so much like fall. And so I was just ready to charge in there and start getting some, you know, some fall vibes going in the kitchen. And so that's what I did. Aside from the fall cooking that I'm going to show you, a lot of this has to do with apples because it is apple season, right? So I have that big old apple tree down there that I've shown in many, many videos. And it is a very, very old apple tree. From what I can gather from information left by previous owners or whatnot, the tree is about 80 to 90 years old. And of course, the best apples are at the very top of this 35-foot tree. So I didn't want my husband climbing the tree to go get it, but he did take his tractor down and lift that up, climb on top of that, and was actually able to get me a nice bucket full of apples. I have no idea how many pounds I have to start with, but the first thing that I did with it, you will see in this video, and that was to make some apple cinnamon muffins, and then I canned some applesauce. I still have 1 plan left. If you can see right back there, I have that many apples left, and there's probably more that he could get if I needed it. And so when I was in town yesterday, I ended up picking up some aluminum pie pans, and my plan at this point is to make up some pie crust and turn the rest of these apples into apple pie for the freezer. Those are really, really nice to have on hand. I've done that for years, and I will be putting in there as many as I can get. Anyway, that is my plan. So let's get started, and I'm going to show you what I did. The very first thing I started with was making some soup. This was going to be a butternut squash, carrot soup, and sweet potato. I kind of forgot to get that in the picture, but I started by washing all my vegetables and getting them kind of cut up. My idea with this was to roast the vegetables because I think it makes actually the best tasting soup when you roast especially these types of vegetables, but really any vegetable. If you roast them before you turn them into soup, it really does something to enhance the flavor. So I got everything nicely cleaned out there and remembered, oh, that's right, I wanted to add that sweet potato. So I went and got that, washed it up, and basically did the same thing to that. Cut it up, peeled it real well, and chopped that up into fairly large chunks because, like I said, I was planning on roasting them, and added that to my pan. I then grabbed some olive oil and just basically drizzled some on all of my vegetables and mixed those up really well so that they were nicely coated with the olive oil, and then I sprinkled them with some salt and pepper. So just really, really basic, nothing too fancy here. I popped those into a 400-degree oven and basically checked them every 20 minutes to see if they had gotten soft yet. Then it was time to turn my attention to my bucket of apples, and I was going to make some apple cinnamon muffins. So I pulled a few of them out and went ahead and washed those up real well and peeled them, cored them, and chopped them up. The recipe I was trying out this time was from Sally's Baking Addiction, and I will leave that below in the description box. But for right now, after I had them all chopped up, I just left them in some water that I had added lemon juice to, turned my attention back to the vegetables, stirred them up, checked them, and they were not ready yet. I was trying to get kind of all my chopping and my chopping and cutting things up done at one time. I was adding some onion and garlic to this soup as well. So at that time, I decided I would just go ahead and get all of that cut up and chopped up. At that point, it was time to check my vegetables again, and I found that my sweet potatoes were done. So I went ahead and removed those into a bowl, set them aside, and put the rest of them back into the oven. I put a soup pot on the burner and added my onions and garlic to that and started just kind of softening that up a bit. And then it was time once again to check in on those vegetables, and I discovered that my squash was done. The carrots still needed a little bit more time, but not a whole lot more time, and they seemed to finish up about the same time my onions and garlic was nice and soft. And so I removed those, and it was time to start making my soup. And in classic style, I forgot to turn the camera on when I moved things around, and basically all I did was scoop the flesh out of the squash, put those into the pot with the onions and the garlic, and I did the same with the sweet potatoes. I just kind of dumped those right into my pot. Next, I added my roasted carrots, and I stirred everything around. I had a little tiny jar of chicken broth in the refrigerator that I wanted to finish off, and so I put that in there, and then I added water and some chicken broth powder. You could also use something like Better Than Bouillon, or you could use a box of chicken broth if you wanted, or vegetable broth. Then it was time to go in with my stick blender and kind of just mush everything up and start blending it all up until it was a really nice puree. But it was too thick, and I knew that I was going to want to add more liquid. I just kept adding water until it got to the consistency that I wanted. I would taste it every now and then to see if it needed anything else added to it. I did eventually add some more chicken broth powder. That was about all. The flavors were incredible. At the very end, I added some milk and a little bit of butter just to make this a super creamy soup. Oh yes, and I added some red pepper flakes because we like this soup to have just a little bit of a bite. And that was pretty much it. At that point, that soup was done, and let me tell you, it was delicious. Now that the soup was done, it was time to turn my attention to these muffins, and they went together super easy. I would definitely make this recipe again. The muffins turned out so moist and so delicious and just full of apple flavor. The recipe did call for either sour cream or yogurt, and I did not have any. I think it was Greek yogurt, and I did not have any Greek yogurt, so I ended up adding sour cream to it. And like I said, these just ended up tasting so incredibly good. I will definitely have them on my list to make again and would highly recommend them to you guys. Technically, the recipe said it made a dozen. My muffin pans were just a little bit large, so I only got like 9, I think, out of it. I have some silicone muffin pans that I feel like I really should have used, and I probably would have gotten a dozen or more. These ended up being a little bit too big, as far, I like small little muffins to have with a cup of coffee or something like that. However, that hasn't stopped us from eating them. The recipe also called for a crumb topping and then a glaze on the top. I opted not to do the crumb topping. The muffins were plenty sweet, just as they were, and so all I did was make the glaze and add that onto the top. Although one of these days, when I make them again, I will make them in a smaller muffin pan, and who knows, maybe then I will do the crumb topping. But there you go, our soup and the muffins, and oh my gosh, just absolutely delicious. Now I'm ready to get on to the apple things I've been doing, and I just wanted to say that these apples from this tree are super small, and they have a copper blight on them because of all the rain we get. The copper gets washed out of the soil. They have, just marks. They aren't buggy or wormy. I mean, there may be occasional little things, so I always check them carefully, wash them well, but for the most part, they're just small, and so it is sometimes really hard to figure out what is the best thing to do with them, which is why I chose applesauce for a lot of them. I also canned my applesauce into really small half-pint jars because it's just hubby and I now, so we don't really go through a lot of applesauce. I do eat some, but again, I typically buy those little fruit cups, and so I didn't want to open a big jar and then have to always be figuring out what to do with it. So that's why I ended up canning these in such small little jars. Anyway, okay, let's move on. I started this by pulling out 10 half-pint basically jelly jars and getting those all washed up and ready to go, and then went to my storage area and pulled out my Victorio strainer. If you have one of these, you know how wonderful they are, and if you don't, well, I'm about to show you how wonderful they are. I got that all washed up because it had been a few years since I had pulled it out, and I've had this for probably 30 years or more, and you know what, every single time I use it, I have to look at the instructions because it is just a little bit complicated, and I always look at it thinking, how do I do this again? But once I got it, looked at the instructions, got it all set up, it was ready to go. It was time to move on to my apples. So I had about 8 or 9 pounds of apples there. I did weigh those out. After washing them up, I started to just cut them in half and then into quarters, and I do take a little bit of time to look at them because, like I said, they could have little things here and there. If I see anything I don't like or bruise spots or whatever, I then will cut that out. But mostly all I do is cut them into quarters and put them into my pot, and that's right, peels, cores, everything just go right into the pot. I add a little bit of water to the bottom because I don't want them to scorch, and I put them on kind of a medium to low heat and just to let them start cooking away. I keep an eye on them so that they don't scorch or burn on the bottom. That's why it's important to do it over a low heat. And once all my apples are super soft, and that is my sign that they are ready to go, I carry them over to my Victorio strainer, and then scoop by scoop, I start putting them into the top funnel part. And then this is where the fun part happens. I crank on that handle and keep turning that, and all of a sudden applesauce starts coming out of one side, and over here on the other side is where all those pits, peels, seeds, and everything else get put. When my kids were young and at home, this was their absolute favorite job. We used to make just lots and lots of jars every year of applesauce from that tree, and like I said, this was always their favorite part. Anyway, now I am done with all the applesauce, and I'm going to transfer it now back into my pot so that I can heat it up. Because these apples, they are Granny Smith apples, and they are extremely tart, I am going to add just a little bit of sugar. I wasn't sure how much. I measured out a half a cup there and just started sprinkling in the sugar and then tasting it to see if it was enough. And in the end, I added a half cup, and that was all I added. It still had just a tiny bit of tart taste, but to me it tasted absolutely perfect. And once it was all done, it was now time to clean up this big mess, which actually didn't take that long. And the very last step now was to put my hot applesauce into my jars and get ready to can that. I was easily able to fill up those 10 jars and had about maybe 2 cups left, which we have definitely been enjoying. And I'm so happy to be able to put these on my canning shelf and to enjoy them for the rest of the winter. I use the boiling water bath canner setting on my Presto digital canner. I used it to can some jam back in December, but super easy. Once again, I'm totally in love with this canner, whether you're doing pressure canning or water bath canning. I canned them for 20 minutes. There was no canning time on half pint jars, so I just went with the time for pint jars, which was 20 minutes. And at that point, pulled them out. And that was all there was to that. Beautiful jars of applesauce to add to my canning shelf for this winter. Okay, you guys, thank you for coming along with me today and sharing in with this my little bit of fall baking, cooking, canning, whatnot. Right now, it's not feeling very fall-like. It's supposed to be like 98, 99 degrees today. But, you know, I know those days are coming, and it really helped to do that and take advantage of those cool days. And it just put me really nicely into a fall mood. So I hope this inspires you guys to do the same thing. In any case, I hope you guys have a really blessed day today, a blessed week ahead, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye-bye.